All right, I'm Kelsey Schmitz, and I work at the University of Washington at the SMART Center, the School Mental Health Assessment Research and Training Center. I am the School Mental Health Lead for the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. And today we have our next installment of the ISF West Coast Party webinars that we're doing in collaboration with our partners at the Pacific Southwest MHTTC. So it's great to have you with us. Some of you I recognize were with us in both of our first modules. So it's great to have you back again today. Our presenter today will be Susan Barrett, who's experiencing some bandwidth issues at her house, something that I'm sure we're all familiar with as well. So we won't see Susan today, but we will hear from her. So our funder, SAMHSA, asks that we provide this disclaimer that the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, SAMHSA, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So on this next slide is our land acknowledgement, and the University of Washington SMART Center and Northwest MHTTC acknowledge that we learn, live, and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who walked here before us and those who still walk here. We are grateful to respectfully live and work as guests on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who call this home. The Pacific Southwest, our partners in this collaborative effort, they are led by the Center for Applied Research Solutions. They have offices across California and Sacramento, the land of the Nisenan people in Santa Rosa, the land of the 8 Cahuilla bands, and Los Angeles, the land of the Tongva peoples. CARS acknowledges the belonging of this land to the indigenous people named and the unrecognized tribes and peoples as well. So as many of you probably know, the MHTTC is a SAMHSA funded grant and was funded in late 2018. We include 10 regional centers, a National American Indian and Alaska Native Center, a National Hispanic and Latino Center, and a National Coordinating Office. The series that's being sponsored today is by the Pacific Southwest, which is on down there on your left in green, and the Northwest MHTTCs. And if you're calling from, joining from outside of our region, we just strongly encourage you get to know your region's school mental health lead and the local contextualized options that you have for your area. But you're also welcome to join us for our sessions as well. So just to quickly do a review, our very first time together, we did a poll and we learned that a lot of folks were joining us that hadn't participated in some previous ISF webinars that we had done last year. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving you all some information if you were new or just needed a review of what is an interconnected systems framework. And then I'll also share with you where you can get some additional introductory information if you feel like that would help you better engage in our time together. So ISF is a structure and a process for education and mental health systems to interact in the most effective and efficient way. It's the deliberate application of the multi-tiered PBIS framework for all of our social, emotional, and behavioral interventions. We align all of those related initiatives through one system. That happens at the state and the regional level, the district, and the school level. A couple of key features of ISF is that family and youth participation is central, and that this process is guided by key stakeholders in education and mental health and community systems. We also wanted to bring to your attention some of the acronyms and abbreviations that we may use, although we're going to try hard not to use those. But for those of you who are new and joining us for the first time, we just want to make sure that if we're using an acronym or abbreviation and you don't know what it stands for, let us know in the chat. And here are some of the more common ones that we use. EBP is evidence-based practice. ISF is interconnected systems framework. MHTTC, the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports. PBIS is positive behavioral interventions and supports. When we say PD, that usually stands for professional development. You might hear us probably on the last slide even see us use SEB, social emotional behavioral. SEL is social emotional learning, and SMH for school mental health. And like I said, we may use others, and we just encourage you to let us know if we've said something that you need some additional explanation for. So I mentioned those introductory materials. Like I said, about a year ago, we started this series with Susan after she and the Pacific Southwest created these really outstanding fact sheets on interconnected systems framework. And we did a webinar based on each of those fact sheets and brought in field experts who were implementing ISF to present with us. But we encourage you to take a look at that information if you're feeling like there are things that might have been covered in an introductory sense in some of those opportunities. Great, thanks, Megan. So here's an overview of what we're hoping to accomplish this year. So we've done a better job this year of really blending the systems, data, and practice sessions that we did last year into a more integrated program session with some deepened content. So we have 4 sessions with Susan and other field experts and 6 sessions with University of Southern California staff. And then that'll culminate in a town hall style format where we'll bring everyone who presented back together. Susan's sessions will focus more on the systems and structures, pulling heavily from the newly released ISF implementation guide, and we'll make sure you have the link to that. And then USC sessions will focus on the practices. You're welcome to attend just Susan's sessions or just the USC sessions, or you can join everything. And we really encourage you to have your team members join you for these sessions so you all can continue to have conversations and build upon what you've been learning. So just a reminder that our next session after today will be on November 5th, and it will be on virtual adaptations of psychological first aid. There is still time for you to register or invite others to register. And then our next slide is introducing our presenter. So again, welcome to Susan, who serves as the director of the Center for Social Behavior Supports at Old Dominion University, and is also an implementer partner with the U.S. National Technical Assistance Center on positive behavioral interventions and supports. So at this time, although we won't get to see Susan, I'd like to have Susan come on, and I'm going to hand things over to her.
Great, thank you, Kelsey. So let's get started. Today's session is an opportunity for us to describe how district and school leaders can incorporate trauma-informed practices and social emotional behavior competencies within a PBIS framework. So we're going to be going over some strategies to develop out the systems that support the staff to incorporate this into all aspects of their system. We wanted to model for you ways that we are adjusting the behavior expectations for the adults that we're caring for now and forever. And so one of the things that we've done is we've modified the teaching expectation matrix to include some items related to self-care. We know that there is a staggering amount of need and so much additional stress and trauma right now, given the multiple crises that we're facing, that we wanted to be sure that we were highlighting and focusing on this notion that we are going to be safe by creating an emotional support team for ourselves. And if you were joining us for Module 1, Steve did a tremendous job on giving us some strategies for self-care. And what we're trying to do right now is kind of build a system or develop out a routine where we're reminding one another of that. and we're making sure that we are developing our own self-care plans. We're having an opportunity to write it down and sharing it with our emotional support team. We want to double check on our friends right now. We know that the fall, the forecasting pattern that we were kind of seeing that Washington State Public Health provided us with this notion that we were going to see increased trends of depression, anxiety, and suicide ideation. So now more than ever, it's really important that we check on each other, and that if we feel a sense of hopelessness, that we know that there is a 24-hour hotline that's available. We want to also recognize and be engaged, be aware of our own stress levels, recognize them, and name the emotions that we're feeling and experiencing. It's also important to pay attention to joy, do some body checks for areas of tightness. And if you're feeling extra tight today, take a couple of deep belly breaths and try to get in a relaxing space so that we're more open to accepting some new information coming at you today. And finally, in that engaged space, be sure to take some movement breaks that we might need to increase that dose and make sure we're hydrating. In the respect goal, we want to make sure that we continue to nurture our bodies with healthy food, develop some calming routines, especially right before sleep, and that we're building a routine for daily exercise. And these self-care behaviors, again, it's really important to have our own kind of self-care plan, but it's also important to create a system where we have a collective self-care protocol. And so in doing this and setting the stage, we are modeling for others how to kind of build in that routine. For today's session, we know that many of you joined our module 1, but I wanted just to kind of go over some of the big key ideas from module 1, and we'll have an opportunity to launch into more specifics today around these big ideas. So the number one takeaway from our last time together is that, you know, we had this mental health crisis prior to COVID, and now we are seeing a surge in behavioral health symptoms, and it will be likely to be seen in phases. And one of the phases that was predicted for the fall semester is this increase in suicide ideation, depressive symptoms, and anxious symptoms. So we want to make sure that we are using that forecasting data to strengthen and fortify our Tier 1 system so that everybody sees a system where we're increasing that dose of support all around for all staff, all students, and all families. From Module 1, we also, I highlighted this increased need that COVID has really exposed the impact on our Black, Brown, and migrant communities at higher rates. And we talked a little bit about how they were rooted in many social inequities that have taken space for many, many generations. And that we called attention to this time right now for this opportunity at this moment to redesign the entire system, because it wasn't working for many of our vulnerable communities before. And so we should never want to go back to the system that we were in. So we were talking a lot about in what ways as individuals and as individuals that are serving on teams, how do we disrupt the status quo? You know, in PBIS, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been kind of pushing on this desire to change the system. And really, PBIS has helped us develop a more effective, efficient, and equitable system within schools. It also has really helped us improve our social, emotional, and academic outcomes for all students, including students with disabilities and students from underrepresented groups. But we know that simply isn't enough if we're not broadening out our purpose and including other partners that are working, other child-serving partners within our communities. So we coined this term, interconnected system framework, to launch from PBIS and connect in a more deliberate way with our community providers. So ISF, the Interconnected System Framework, is the deliberate application of using the multi-framework to include all social, emotional, behavior interventions. It's also about aligning those social emotional related initiatives through a single system of support, and that there's symmetry of process across the state, region, district, and school level. So we want to build these team-based routines and data problem-solving, data-based decision-making routines across the entire cascade. ISF is also about making sure we've got active participation of families, youth, and community partners. And that is really kind of at the heart and soul, that central feature of an interconnected system framework approach. We want to make sure that we are calling attention to installing, and specifically installing, a trauma-informed approach by really using the anchors of the core features of MTSS. So everything's going to be done with teams. We are going to use an expanded data lens to make sure that we are looking at trends and patterns that are emerging in the community and preparing for that increased need. We're also going to look at the strengths of our community and build from our internal school community, but also our neighboring community, and making sure that we're building and launching from the strengths that already exist in that system. We're going to make sure that we are having a formal process for selecting interventions and making sure that we don't overwhelm our adults and inadvertently increase stress. And finally, we want to make sure that as we're installing a trauma-informed approach, that we are recognizing the need of training and coaching to support teachers, all instructional staff, to kind of lean in to be more mental health ambassadors, because we really want to grow their capacity to be comfortable in this space. And we talked a lot in Module 1 about how to do that in the context of ISF, the Interconnected System Framework. Along with that, we discussed 4 key messages, right? We want to invest in one set of teams where we consolidate our teaming structure to only have one set of teams, right? Those, unfortunately, when we set up too many teams, it has this siloing effect. Number 2, we want to make sure that our success is defined by outcomes, and we're not simply counting the number of kids accessing services and calling that kind of an acceptable outcome. We actually want to see our students, our families, and our staff benefit from what we invest in. The third key message is that mental health is for all, right? We all need skills and strategies to cope with stressors in our life and to handle and problem solve and handle our relationships and handle our own personal needs, but we also need skills to be able to incorporate those lessons into our academic content. So we're going to, again, increase the number of staff who are mental health ambassadors. And then finally, number 4, the core features are absolutely essential to install anything, including school mental health and including the trauma-informed components. So again, this is all about disrupting the status quo. So to what extent in the role that you're serving can you help change the routines and procedures that are going on within your team meetings? This might mean that we are including other folks to participate in our team meetings, and we're expanding the technical expertise that exists within our leadership teams. In what ways are you disrupting the status quo by changing how interventions are selected and monitored? So kind of really moving away from individual clinicians making choices on their own to bringing those clinicians into the team and having the team at large review data and research to make critical decisions about what the menu of available interventions will be within our school community. In disrupting the status quo, we want you to push on this change in language, right? We want to move away from generic terms such as counseling and supports to identifying really clearly what is the specific evidence-based intervention that we're going to use? What will the students, the children and youth say and do differently as a result of participating in that intervention? And then how do we support transference and generalization to make sure that what we learn inside those learning sessions, whether they be class-wide, targeted group, or even in an individual session, How do we translate that and have those behaviors, those skills and strategies be used across locations and across different domains within our life, home, school, and community? And finally, to disrupt the status quo, how do we change roles and functions of the staff? How do we move away from having a clinician show up and perhaps have service delivery within our school to making sure that we pull them into our team and that they're helping non-clinicians help us deliver those social emotional skills and competencies? So the interconnected system framework is going to help set the stage for disrupting the status quo. So now it's time to kind of dig a little deeper and more specifically talk about how to integrate a trauma-informed approach within a PBIS framework. To help get us started, I wanted you to think about all of the professional development that you have gotten over the past couple of years, because schools are investing heavily in professional development. And over the past decade, all child-serving systems have really increased their focus on childhood trauma and its impact on the mental health of children and youth. And educators, following the lead of child welfare and mental health organizations, are intensifying efforts to ensure that all teachers and administrators are working in a system that provides accurate information about the prevalence and impact of trauma. We're providing training and coaching around trauma response, and we want to make sure that we are developing a very clear understanding of the role that you have in supporting the students that you're working with who are experiencing trauma. All right, so we're really having this heavy investment in professional development. And so I'm wondering if you could reflect on the opportunities you've had over the last couple of years. Answer this question for us, because we're really kind of interested in what, as a result of the training, as a result of some of the research that you've done as an individual, what does it mean to be trauma-informed? And have you type into chat what it really means to you to be trauma-informed. Thank you, Adrienne. You're the first to put something into chat, and I really appreciate that. And she's saying, make sure we don't re-traumatize those we encounter. Thank you, Rebecca. Understand in words and actions when working with others. Oh, great. Now we're getting a bunch of responses. Thank you so much for engaging with us this afternoon. Considering past history versus making judgments based on observed behaviors. Awesome, Karen. Thank you so much for offering that to us this afternoon. And now we're seeing a lot of you all populate some answers in the chat. Beautiful. Oh, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us and sharing and offering and engaging with us. Beautiful, beautiful. Being mindful, having safe, predictable environments and trusting relationships. Right on, Morgan. That's exactly right. Thank you. Okay, so moving forward, thank you again for engaging. And we're going to provide you some additional opportunities to engage with us today. I wanted to offer a resource that we're going to be describing for you today. We have a brief that just was launched about integrating a trauma-informed approach within a PBIS framework. And one of the definition that we kind of leaned into for this work came from SAMHSA. And so I just wanted to offer and read that definition with you. It's actually located right in that green box there. And I love this definition because it really kind of builds into the systems piece. They say a trauma-informed approach is a program, organization, or system that is trauma-informed, realizes the widespread impact of trauma, and understands potential paths for recovery, recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and other involved with the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. So this is kind of our guide for how we approached describing trauma, and I just wanted to recognize that this definition from SAMHSA is kind of the overall outcome of how we're approaching this work. What's really interesting about kind kind of the investment so far in all of the professional development and training and coaching is this notion that so far we have been unable to demonstrate a systemic or programmatic change in outcome in schools, right? So despite all the work and all those schools are investing heavily, a recent analysis of the literature found no rigorous evaluations or evidence of the impact of these efforts in educational settings. And just like other interventions focused on improving student social, emotional, behavioral functioning, trauma-focused interventions are unlikely to work without ongoing analysis of implementation and corresponding refinement of strategies, which is why we're leaning so hard into the MTSS. Because if you're a system that's already delivering PBIS, the positive behavior interventions and supports, or a multi-tiered system of support, you're going to be much better able to launch from that because your system has already been designed. So we need to be really careful and cautious that as we're installing the trauma-informed, that we are creating an evaluation plan where we can determine the impact on adult behavior by tracking fidelity of implementation, but also the impact on students. What will kids say and do differently as a result of being trauma-informed system? What will the adults say and do differently as a result of receiving training on trauma-informed care, right? So it's going to be really important that the team stages this, and we're going to dive today into how to make that happen. So again, in reflection and sharing and chat with us, is your site providing training to your staff about trauma and its impact on students? And if so, let us know if your site is assessing the specific impact of the training in terms of how you expect staff to use that new information. Have you clearly defined what staff will say and do differently as a result of that training? How are you giving them ample time to plan and figure out ways to connect the academic content with the skills and strategies that we're training on in our trauma-informed care? And then finally, reflecting and sharing in chat, is your site assessing the impact of these training in terms of student outcomes? And what student outcomes are you looking for as a result of putting so much time and effort into these training opportunities? So again, thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you, April and Betty and Sierra, for engaging with us this afternoon and sharing and reflecting out in chat. Thank you so much. So Sierra's saying currently a one and done at the beginning of the year, but we are currently in the early phases of implementation, more in depth with coaching and weaving it into the current system. So it sounds like that's kind of up. So Sarah, that really reflects, I think, what a lot of folks are experiencing is that right now it's just kind of situated as a one and done, a train and hope. And folks are really struggling with kind of figuring out what's next and how to incorporate it into the current system and how to align it and integrate it. So thank you so much. That was really well said, perfectly said. And thank you so much, April and Sarah, for offering your experience. Looks like April, we are taking a coordination of care approach. I've been training on trauma for 4 years. We are informed and moving toward responsive. Awesome. So we're in kind of a phase one where we are informing folks. We're getting folks aware of the science and how the brain develops in kind of long-term bouts of stress. And we're making sure that our whole community is kind of informed about the flight, fright, and freeze response. Awesome. And Ross, again, thank you for engaging with us. I don't see an organized way to integrate these priorities because too many districts see these as competing interests, that and not enough time. Absolutely, couldn't agree more, which is why we need people who have authority to really organize and integrate at the district community level. Ross, we need those folks participating in this work because we can't leave it up to individual building level sites to figure out how to integrate these. Our district and at the district community level, our county level, our state level they've got to be the ones that deliberately show us and model for us how we integrate these things so they're not seen as in competition of each other. And hopefully today we'll give you really clear, specific examples on how to do that. Thank you again for engaging with us. We're going to start to talk about the features of trauma-informed practices. And in our brief, we really describe it in 4 distinct features. The first one is setting up and creating a safe, predictable, consistent environment. The second feature is teaching and reinforcing social, emotional, behavior competencies. The third is promoting belonging and relationship development. And the fourth is supporting cognitive, emotional, and behavioral regulation. So let's start with the first 2 features. So let's talk about what PBIS has really done in the context of creating a predictable, consistent, positive, and safe environment, right? PBIS has helped us develop a leadership team, and it's really helped schools prioritize the entire ecosystem and addressing a safe, predictable environment in a very holistic way, right? And we're now kind of expanding the utilization of PBIS to move beyond social behaviors, and now we're moving in the social, emotional learning domain, and I'll describe what that means and what that looks like. So I love this graphic because it's talking about what we've been able to do in PBIS, the randomized control trials. When you're implementing just Tier 1 with Fidelity, you actually see by student report, staff report, and some of the outcome data that the whole ecosystem is set up to be predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. And at the heart of everything we do, we want to make sure we're equitable, right? And that means that just by delivering PBIS, we are trauma responsive. I want to talk a little bit about how this is really done, right? In order to create safe, predictable, consistent environments, again, when we designed a PBIS or an MTS system, we asked you to form a leadership team. And that leadership team really needed to represent the entire school community, right? We wanted family voice, student voice, and voice of everybody within that community to be represented on that team. And we wanted those core values to be discussed and described with this notion that we would develop some common language around the expectations we had for one another. And that it was built on the core values of the people that we're serving around that leadership team. We knew that if we were going to do this across the entire system, we were going to need to teach this consistently across all locations in the school. That it wouldn't be just training and hope, it was having a team come to this training and figure out ways that we would build routines and make sure that every teacher within the school and every support staff was investing in using this common language and common approach to teaching explicitly what the social behaviors were, right? And so many of our schools ended up with expectations like be safe, be respectful, and be responsible. And together as an organization, they identified what kids and staff would say and do to show us what safety looked like. So in this example, we've got be safe means that we're going to keep our hands and feet to ourselves. And we're going to give everybody an opportunity to practice what that looks like and sounds like in the various locations of our school. We're now, now that we're in kind of a physically distanced era, we're also incorporating some of those COVID safety measures into our specific behaviors, right? Where we teach how to wear a mask for those of us who have gone back in person, that we're staying 6 feet apart, and we have a hand washing protocol. In the respect category, this team has also clearly articulated and defined social behaviors around academic, right? Those academic behaviors. How do we use a signal to ask a public and private question? And we give an opportunity to practice that. What does it look like to track the speaker and have eyes on the speaker and nod and affirm that you're listening and taking notes, right? And then under the responsible expectation, how do we turn in all work, and how do we double check our sources to make sure that we're being good consumers out there of the information? So So this is how we've created that safe, predictable landscape. But now we're expanding on those social behaviors, and now we're bringing social-emotional skills into the teaching matrix. So the expectations and the language is still going to remain the same, but now we're teaching and reinforcing those social-emotional behavior competencies. And so this would be a poster that would be on the wall, or maybe if you're in your virtual space, this might be something that you review in the beginning of your distance learning classes. But this is that through line, right? In our community, we're going to be safe, but yes, we're going to keep our hands and feet to ourselves, and we're going to use those same distancing protocols. But now we're going to start to talk about telling an adult when I'm worried about a friend. Under the respect goal, yes, we're going to still use our academic behaviors, but now we're going to pull in and incorporate social-emotional competencies like making sure everybody gets a turn. And in responsible, yes, we're going to turn in our work on time, but we're also going to teach how to check in on our feelings throughout the day, right? So we're going to expand the utilization of the teaching matrix, that common language, that common script, and we're going to make sure that these competencies permeate the entire system. It's about developing the system for supporting the adults, right? So we need to secure buy-in because many of us have never been trained in the skills and strategies related to mental health. And we're a little bit shy about incorporating these elements into our academic content. The bottom line here is that we're still going to design and use an instructional approach. And in my mind, a skill is just a skill, no matter if it's an academic skill, literacy or math, or a social behavior skill like teaching how to scan and take notes, or if it's a social emotional skill like checking in on our feelings, we're still going to use that same instructional logic. And if I'm a teacher then already used to teaching skills, then it might be that I get behind and am more comfortable teaching these social emotional skills if I can see the connect point. We're also going to use data to get buy-in, right? We're going to show the trend data with respect to how many of our students in percentage terms, like we're still going to use aggregate data. What are the percentage of our students that are experiencing stress right now? What is our percentage of staff that are experiencing stress right now? We are not going to be able to manage our way out of the academic losses if we're not prioritizing de-stressing everyone and building some school-wide calming strategies. So how do we use that data to secure buy-in and improve our methods? And how do we make sure that our staff have ample time to really work with small teams of staff to incorporate some of these lessons into their academic content? How do we showcase that we are doing this with fidelity and that students are benefiting from it, right? So the professional development should always be team-led, right? We shouldn't do this individual training of one person at a time, right? This is a team sport. We have to bring the team in, and the coaching should be there during the training events, but even after the training events to make sure that they are supporting us to reach fidelity. We want to move into this notion that we're moving away from a small number of staff delivering lessons, so social, emotional, behavior lessons, to making sure all staff are providing opportunities to teach across all settings and incorporate these strategies all day. So let me give you an example of how this works, right? We're still going to use the same process for teaching social, emotional behaviors as we are for academics. We're going to define, we're going to model, we're going to give an opportunity to practice. And if we expect these calming strategies to take place in non-classroom settings, we're actually going to take the kids out to the hallway and we're going to have an opportunity to practice right there in the hallway or in the cafeteria, right, when we finally get back face to face. And we're going to have an opportunity even in our distance platforms to practice these calming strategies. We're going to monitor to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for high quality implementation. And then we're going to adjust and reteach to make sure that we're building fluency and we've reached that fluency. And we're going to get more efficient over time. So it's the exact same process as we use for academics. the big idea here is that when that trauma-informed care or trauma modules or training on trauma come to our school, we're not going to set up a separate team. We're actually going to use that same team, that same leadership team, and now we're going to invite individuals who have knowledge, expertise, and the ability to provide that coaching and training support around the impact of trauma. We're going to bring them right on the team so that we can stay consistent with that system. And so to Ross's point, we're not splintering out with these competing interests. We're bringing that enhancement right into that school leadership team. We're also going to make sure that we're using data sources that identify the scope of trauma. So just like we're asking the school leadership teams to consider adding a person who has expertise in trauma, we're going to ask the same to be done at the district community level. And we're going to ask with that those expanded members to use a broader range of data that lets us know the wave of need out in the community. And when we start to see that wave build, we can hunker down and expand our tier 1 instruction so that, that we're making sure that we're meeting the vast majority of needs. Data allows teams to determine how interventions may need to be redesigned or added at different tiers. Teams also need to identify other data trends that are taking place right now, and you need to make sure that you've got data for decision rules to figure out when students might need more. When are we going to kick it up a notch because what we're doing across Tier 1 isn't making an impact with a smaller subset of our kids, and we need to layer and connect what we're delivering at Tier 1 by increasing the dose of support for those students in a more targeted way. And then finally, how do we leverage both trauma and behavioral knowledge to ensure that the desired results are being amplified? So let's break this down a little bit. In terms of some of the outcome data, you may or may not be using office discipline referrals right now, given that you might be in virtual space. And when I was talking about disrupting the status quo and really calling our attention to some of the changes in our language, I want to call office discipline referrals out for a second. And I'm wondering if we can reimagine a term for this. You know, a lot of our students are leaving the instructional environment for various reasons, and it's really important that we uncover kids with internalizing needs. Like in that expanded data set, many of our students are going to see the school nurse. So I'm wondering, sometimes our kids have externalizing behaviors, right? They might throw something, they might disrupt the classroom. Other students that experience trauma their behaviors might manifest itself in a somatic complaint, like a headache or a stomach ache. What if we were to change the term office referrals to calling it a care ticket, right? This might adjust our response across the entire system if we change some of our terms to reflect out exactly what we're doing. And maybe we change the terms for suspensions and expulsions and student attendance, right? Let's just really push the envelope and talk about what we want our adults to say and do differently, and how some of the terms makes us kind of go into resorting to exclusionary practices when we really need to amplify mental health support. So the big idea here is really to push on these data sources. Think about expanding your data set. What are other data pieces you need to know right now, right? What about the percentage of students who can't come back face-to-face because they might be having a medical condition that prevents them, or they might be living with somebody who's at a heightened risk? What about the percentage of students that are engaging in virtual learning and that might be feeling much more successful in virtual learning? So really think about, as you're pulling in an expanded group of people to the table at your team, think about other data sources to use to really uncover the need and have this kind of surveillance mindset where we're always trying to uncover the need and forecast the behavior, the social behavior trends that might be coming at us, rather than sitting back and waiting for a problem to identify itself, right? It's kind of this new surveillance mindset where we're actively pursuing and uncovering what the needs are. So think about ways that you can expand your data set as you expand your team membership. So as you're thinking about incorporating your trauma-informed enhancement, think about ways that you're going to prepare your team to set a progress monitoring system, right? It's important that we track fidelity as we augment the intervention before we are looking at outcomes. We should always be looking at fidelity and impact together. So really be thinking about designing the evaluation procedures prior to the start of a trauma-informed intervention. Consider the data that you're using to identify students as needing trauma-informed as the possible progress monitoring and assessment data points, right? So if you're looking at attendance, for example, because chronic absenteeism is an indication in large part to having a mental health condition, right? And if we can identify students who might be chronically absent as needing to kick it up a notch, then we should be using attendance data to progress monitor the extent to which that student, we're having impact with that student, because we should see that student coming to school on a more frequent basis. So consider the data used to identify students as your progress monitoring assessment data point. And finally, the new skills can be monitored by expanding the teaching matrix for all and the daily progress report for some. So let me give you some examples about what that looks like. So let's think about incorporating those trauma-informed components or competencies right into that teaching matrix that I was describing before. Once teams have selected and prioritized the trauma-informed competencies, they can be added to that teaching matrix. This will ensure that the competencies are directly taught, modeled, and practiced with students. We're also going to make sure that we build some school-wide routines that include calming strategies, like putting into our schedule a daily physical activity, or maybe including some biology breaks in our daily schedule. Right, so I'll give you an example. In Michigan, for example, they have a hand washing protocol because most of their schools have gone back face-to-face. And every 2 hours, they have a hand washing routine. And one of the things that they've done within their school schedule is pair the hand washing routine with their school-wide calming strategy. So everybody across the entire school, when they have their hand washing routine, they dim the lights, they put on some calming music, and they take some really big belly breaths, and they use their school-wide calming strategy. So it's not enough just to have teachers ensure that competencies are directly taught by using the teaching matrix. We need to develop a system that allows a routine to be shaped within a daily schedule. I want to show you what this teaching matrix actually looks like when we incorporate those trauma-informed competencies into it. Right? So notice on the left-hand side, this is a high school example, and in their expectations, their common language that they've established within their school community is respectful, organized and achieving, and responsible. So they pulled the person that had the expertise in trauma-informed approaches and trauma-informed care onto the team, and they've used some data. And one of the things that their data suggested was that we needed to employ a school-wide calming strategy because about 30 to 40% of the kids had self-reported that they were experiencing extreme moments of stress across the day. And so they did this beautiful thing, right? They added a column right into the teaching matrix, and they identified what we will say and do when we feel upset. So under the respect expectation, when we feel upset, we're going to ask for a break if we need a moment, and we're going to name and express our feelings appropriately. In the organized and achieving expectation, we're going to make sure that we talk to somebody if we need help when we start to feel upset, and we talk and talking to somebody only if it makes them feel better. And then the responsible expectation, we're going to stop and take a few breaths, recognize what we're feeling, and name it. Notice too, at the bottom, we're also identifying ways that teachers and other instructional leaders and other support staff can support having our students use these skills, right? So under, again, that calming strategy, when we feel upset, the teacher's role is going to be to use active supervision, where he or she is scanning and moving and interacting and getting to know students so that she or he can predict when those triggers occur for students, and ramp up the dose of supports by incorporating some of these calming strategies in the schedule during the day. I want to just, again, remind you that we're customizing this teaching matrix and the decisions we make to fit our specific student and staff needs. So as a team with staff, students, and families around the team meeting, we are going to customize our teaching matrix to fit our specific need. We're going to prioritize the skills and strategies we want our kids and staff to say and do. And remember, if you've got a large number of students displaying problem behavior or experiencing stress, then identify the lessons in your SEL curriculum that need to be prioritized. Once you teach those lessons, it's important to identify the key strategies and skills we are going to say and do as a result of learning about this lesson. We're going to add those skills and strategies right into the teaching matrix, because this will build out the system to have a common script that's used across the day in content areas, with opportunities to provide practice. And when on particularly stressful days or maybe time periods that we're going through, we might want to increase the dose of those calming strategies to be employed within the day. So make sure that we're using prompts and scripts for the adults to model, that we're giving ample time for the adults to remind them to prompt and pre-correct, and that when they start to see errors occur, they're going to reteach and provide feedback, just like we do with the academic content, right? We're going to use those same strategies and skills that we use for teaching any academic skill. So this is customized to fit to your student needs. We know that this, at Tier 1, this won't be enough for everybody, and that some of our students will need a little bit more support. All right, so deep breath here. We're starting to take, to kind of move up into Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. And during Module 3, we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but I wanted to make sure that we understand the types of groups that we're setting up within our school community, right? So there should be a Tier 2 team, a systems planning team that is looking at students who need more from us. So their responsibilities are to monitor the data, to select the practice, and install the system. So let me give you an example about what this looks like. So all the way on the left-hand side of your screen, under the basic kind of Tier 2 strategies, we would see all classrooms teaching that core social emotional behavior curriculum daily to all the students within that classroom. And then if there was a need within the classroom, we might determine that a small group within my classroom we need to kick it up a notch for them. And so it might be that a couple times a week when I'm putting kids into small learning groups, maybe I'm teaching math, that I take one of those groups and I pull them out to receive a little bit more instruction on using their calming strategies. And so while all the other groups are starting on their math lesson, I pull in this one group and I give them an extra dose of support before they start their math lesson. All right, so this can be contained and delivered within the classroom, supported by the teacher. And those students that are getting a little bit more dose of support can use self-management cards to kind of track their progress and help remind them to use their calming strategies when they're feeling stress within the classroom. Now move over one column. It could be that another group of students, the team identifies as needing a little bit more dose of support, right? So they're going to pull out some pro-social skills that are in the core SEL curriculum. But now the lessons are going to be taught by a range of different staff who have teaching background, right? We're not going to pull in the clinical staff right now. We're going to stay with the teaching staff. And we're going to help support them to teach these competencies, and we might deliver it outside the classroom. And the dose of support might be 2 times a week, right? Another group of students, if we move over to kind of the third column here, could be that this group of students really needs a specific coping skill strategy, and we need to add an emotional regulation. So at this point, it could be that staff who have a little bit more technical skills are the ones delivering this support to this targeted group, and that it's still being conducted inside the classroom, and the dose is about 2 times a week, right? So this is when we start to pull in our technical experts to teach this. And again, it could take place in a classroom, it could take place outside the classroom, and you would determine the dose of support. And then finally, there'll be another group of students who might need a specific curriculum focused on coping skills. And this is where the team might decide that the SEL curriculum that is being taught for everybody else might not be enough. And they might decide to add an evidence-based practice, maybe called Coping Power, where there's a whole kind of curriculum devoted to teaching coping skills and strategies. And this will definitely need to be delivered and taught by staff with advanced technical skills. And this is probably going to be taught outside the classroom. And the dose of support and teaching occurs is going to be daily, right? So this is an example of a tier 2 team setting up a system where we are moving from basic tier 2 strategy to a more complex dose. But notice something here. We've refrained from automatically moving to needing some supports and going into individual intensive supports, right? We're slowly making sure that as a team, we're making decisions about what our students need, and we're still focused on targeted groups of students receiving this type of support. Okay. So again, we will go into this in a lot more depth during our next module, but I wanted you to at least kind of see where we're going with providing supports for students who need it a little bit more. Similarly, we're going to be able to use the same daily progress report that we might be using for check-in, check-out for students who are receiving targeted supports and trauma-informed. So here's an example of a trauma-informed tier 2 group that is we're staying with the expectations that everybody's using. So we're launching from that common script that everybody's used to, but now we're adding what our students are receiving in this group. We're adding what they're going to say and do differently when they come back to the classroom. So under the safety goals, now if the student that is receiving this type of support outside the classroom, when they walk in and they hand me the daily progress report and I'm the teacher, it prompts me to remind and reteach how to use a body scan and how to use a calming strategy. And it prompts me to increase the dose of what I do for that particular student who's receiving those supports outside my classroom. And the respectful expectation, I know that in group they're working on using their words and using safe hands, and I know what that means, and I know how to support that. And then as a classroom teacher under the responsible expectation, I know now that they're using something called courage cards, where they're working on identifying the feelings. And because I've been given a little bit extra dose of support as a classroom teacher, I know what that means, and I can encourage having that student use those skills in my classroom, right? This helps promote the transference and generalization and communication protocol automatically. So the system is already arranged, the conditions are already arranged for me to be reminded of what to look for when the student comes back into my classroom and is receiving that tier 2 group. We're going to now focus on promoting belonging and relationship development and supporting cognitive, emotional, and behavior regulation. And we kind of did that, the cognitive, emotional, and behavior regulation in item 2, because certainly we're going to pull in those strategies on how to identify and name our emotions. We're going to pull that into our social emotional competency, and hopefully the social emotional learning curriculum that you all have has lessons around that you're going to pull into the academic content. I want to break down a little bit this notion of relationship development. But before we do that, I want you to have an opportunity to share in chat. How are you currently promoting belonging and relationship development? And I'd love to know some of the creative ways you're doing this in virtual conditions.
All right, so Karen's saying memes, gifs, and funny conversations.
Love it.
Sierra is saying among staff, we have what we call wellness circles, which are similar to restorative circles. Bethany is saying shared whiteboard. Awesome. So it sounds like using some of the Zoom or Google features. And April's saying lunch bunch with school counselors, basically a pop-in group for students to do activities together, incentives mailed home, care team meetings, tune up and tune in Tuesdays, which is staff mindfulness activities. I like that a lot. Chad says we're hosting conversation cafes at grade levels. Excellent.
Oh, wow.
Ross is saying he doesn't work directly in a school, but they promote community building circles and advisory for all. Every student gets a mentor. In Jerry's district, they're using 7 mindsets and currently on the lesson for embrace everyone. Angela's saying home visits and grade level Google Meets. Bethany's saying some of the school teachers have virtual classrooms.
Oh, fantastic.
Love them.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. I know one of the things I've been geeking out about as we do some team-based trainings in distance learning is having folks put a song that brings them joy in the chat when we first get started, and we create a playlist for our teams and our professional learning community. And I think music is such a great way to connect and kind of build and launch and kind of promote that belonging. So having it also gives everybody kind of a moment of joy during some long training days, right? So I appreciate you guys putting some awesome ideas into the chat and offering your great innovation with us. I just wanted to offer, we're not going to have time to take a big deep dive into relationship building. We've been doing a lot of work in our team trainings with our PBIS work and distance learning around this. But I wanted to offer ways for you to connect with some resources out there that we've been completely geeking on. And one of those is from Brene Brown, who I'm sure a lot of you absolutely adore and love. But one of the things that we know is that not every educator or support staff person is comfortable with building relationships or fostering care and connections with our kids, especially in the virtual platforms. And so we're breaking this down a little bit more. And I just want to quickly cover this notion of practicing empathy and perspective taking. I don't think we're going to have an opportunity to share the video with you, but we'll make sure you get the link. And if you haven't seen her podcast, Dare to Lead, she's amazing. You see those 4 attributes of empathy where we talk about perspective taking. So we talk about perspective taking, staying out of judgment, recognizing emotions, and communication. And so a lot of our training for staff right now are on these attributes of empathy. And when you download the PowerPoint, and we'll make sure that you're able to get this PowerPoint, you can click on the Cultivate Empathy right here, and it will link you to Brene Brown's little quick video clip on the 4 attributes of empathy. So again, more on Brene Brown. And again, we take teams and all of our staff through this training. At the bottom line is that in perspective taking, that you know your own perspectives, that you show genuine interest in your students, that you ask your students about their opinion and background, that you listen to what students say and avoid making judgments, that you ask open-ended questions, and you listen to the other person's story without our lens or judgment in their truth. And so this really takes practice, and it takes, and it becomes a little bit more complicated in distance learning platforms. But from the chats and all the wonderful things that you are doing, you're holding that space for your students and making sure, yeah, you're giving space and routines to making sure this is happening on a daily basis. And so it's not just about one or two staff making sure that these things are done, but deliberately making sure that this is built into the school routines, and this is being done consistently across every single classroom in your community. You can see ways that we've building the perspective taking right into the remote learning teaching matrix, and you can see the examples here. So it's also important, again, we're trying to systematize these things. So in doing so, it could be that every single teacher has this way to organize the information where they identify the student. We want to make sure that we know their name, we can pronounce their name correctly, and that we have the name to the face, that we know something personal about them, we know something about their academic status, we know whether or not there's a wellness concern, we know their preferred teaching and learning context, and we've got a date of the last contact of a teacher who felt connected maybe last year with that student. Right? So it's about, again, at the teacher level, building a routine into your daily schedule, making sure that before you get on a Zoom classroom time, that you're looking across this organizer and saying to yourself, you know what, I need to figure out something more about Abby today, and making kind of a personal goal in that. Or perhaps doing some weekly reviews and maybe a Monday adjustment where you're changing things up to make sure that everybody feels included and you've got a pretty good handle on all of those aspects of the students that you're serving. At the school level, we really want that team, that leadership team, to build a routine where they're providing prompts and supports for staff to implement this consistently. They're actually doing their own teacher-to-teacher connections and checking in with staff on a regular basis and systematizing that and using fidelity checks and outcome data to celebrate when we do this. All right, the last big idea here is that trauma-informed also means that we decrease the stress of the adults, right? So the big idea is that we need to resist the temptation to keep adding more and more new practices without first considering expanding or repurposing our existing efforts. And I think I gave you some examples today about how to use your PBIS system and launch from that and expand the utilization of the teaching matrix that you might already be using, or expand the use of the daily progress report that you're currently using. So it's really about fortifying and strengthening Tier 1. I think that we can all kind of say, I am overwhelmed because of all the things that we have on our plates right now. It's awesome that social emotional learning is kind of coming to the forefront and people are talking about it. People are talking about mental health, talking about trauma. They're talking about these things. But I think in the talking piece, we're also overwhelming our staff. This might be something that you put in front of your Tier 1 team. And it's kind of just this reminder that the Tier 1 components and expanding and elaborating on those components automatically are hitting that trauma-informed and that social-emotional behavior skill, right? So when you expand your teaching matrix to include coping skills, you are automatically creating a safe, predictable, consistent environment. When you are using your morning circle routine to help practice those new skills and build a sense of classroom community, right? You're building community and you're building relationships. You're teaching and reinforcing those skills and you're supporting regulation. So you're hitting those things automatically when you're expanding on your Tier 1 component. Similarly, when you're using your feedback and acknowledgement system and you're using feedback to increase the use of those new social emotional skills, you're hitting those things already. When teachers are modeling a calm response and providing feedback and putting a daily schedule in place where you are you're practicing and implementing a school-wide calm response, you're already incorporating it, right into that tier 1 system that you've built. And then under active supervision, we need to remind staff that scanning and moving and interacting with students during transitions and those non-classroom settings, again, when we go back face-to-face, that we can actually conduct and get some data through some direct observations and collect counts of staff who are having positive interactions with students during transitions in cafeteria, right? So this is what mental health looks like, right? It's not just having and delivering supports inside an office space with a clinical expert, right? It is that, but it's more than that. It's about those positive relationships and those connections and those greetings that we have each and every day. That's also part of the mental health piece that we're trying to develop out across the system. So this is a good strategy. This is in the practice guide that I offered you today. And this, just by printing this out and enlarging it, and will help, I think, alleviate that siloing or that competing initiative that that Russ kind of brought to our attention today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Susan. If for those of you still with us, please offer Susan some key messages or takeaways from her session today, and a huge thanks to her for persevering through all the technical challenges. It is challenging already to present this way virtually, and with all the barriers that she had to overcome today. I just really appreciate her hanging in there, and for you all offering us some grace. So thank you so much. Somebody's telling us thanks for the great party. Glad you enjoyed it. Here is on the screen is the schedule for our webinar series. We hope you'll continue to join us and continue to engage with us in your conversations, and be able to share your learning and your resources back with us. Just a reminder that this is a team sport, so please encourage your other team members to join us. We're recording these, so maybe these are something you can go back and listen to with others as well. On this slide also are the links to the ISF implementation guide, which if you haven't downloaded and started reading through and using in your work, we would strongly recommend that. Some additional reminders, Susan shared the trauma brief with us all. And there's also another brief on teaching social emotional competencies within the PBIS framework. You can find all 3 of these resources on the PBIS.org. And then keep in touch, reach out to us. This is how you can contact the Pacific Southwest MHTTC, their email and website, sign up for their newsletter, connect with them on Twitter. And similarly for our region, this is how, if you're in Alaska, Oregon, Washington, or Idaho, this is how you can get in touch with us. And again, there's 10 of us across the nation, and we welcome anyone to connect with us if you're interested in doing so, either through our sign up, newsletter sign up, or our Twitter, our social media. And we will, at this point, leave the webinar open for just a little bit so we can and you can copy all the great information and links from the chat. And we look forward to seeing you all on November 5th. Thanks. Have a great rest of your evening.